Well, hey y'all, this is a non-musical playing video. I've got an acquaintance, a friend. He's an inspiration is what he is. There's a guy named Chris Woodward that has some YouTube videos. He's real active on the social media, but one of his things he really likes to do and is passionate about is instruction. And he sort of inspired me to do a little bit of an instructional video. It's usually not my thing. Usually I just play some music and get on with myself. One of the things that he brought up that would be interesting for me to talk about is a thing called sight reading. Now, if you're a horn player, whether brass or woodwind, you're probably familiar with sight reading, because sight reading is a part of the audition process. Whether you're auditioning for a local ensemble or auditioning to get more scholarship money from a university. The audition process, for those of you who may not be familiar, you go into a room, you have two prepared pieces typically. You should know all of your scales, 2 octaves, and if you can play the arpeggios, that's even better. And then they're going to hit you with this thing called sight reading. Sight reading is when they give you a sheet music, or a chart to a song that you have never seen before, and they give you some time to look over it, and then they expect for you to perform that piece. It can be nerve-wracking. It can really make you excited in a negative way, because it's just something you've never seen before. You've got no way to prepare for it. And the first thing I'll tell you about sight reading is you can never practice for sight reading. There's no way to practice for sight reading. The best thing that you can do is have a system or a method for doing the sight reading part of the audition. I'm going to be using a lot of musical terms during this video, so I'm going to put a link down below in the description to a web page that has some musical terminology, things you can look up, and you might even want to save it for future reference. So the first thing that I've got 4 steps that I usually take when sight reading. The first thing that I do is when they hand me the sheet of music and I look at it, if it is something that I've played before, which could be advantageous, if it is something I've played before, I'm honest with the people and I tell them, look, this is something that I've played before. And at that point, one of 2 things is going to happen. They're either going to say, well, hand that back to us and we'll get you something else. Or they'll say, well, this is the sight reading piece that everyone else has been playing. This is the only one we brought. And so we're going to go ahead and let you play this. Now, bear in mind, if it is something you've played before and you're honest with them, you tell them, this is something I've played before, their scrutiny level is going to be a little bit higher than if it's something you've never seen before. But it's always good to be upfront with the people that you're auditioning with. And it's only happened to me once that I was handed something that I had seen before, and I told them, I said, hey, this is something I prepared for a solo ensemble 2 years ago. They didn't have any other music, so they went ahead and let me play it, but I guarantee you they were looking with a high level of scrutiny at what I was doing and how I was playing it. So once you get your sheet of music or your chart, and it's something that you haven't seen before, the first thing that I do is I look at the time signature. The time signature are those 2 numbers at the very upper left-hand corner of the sheet music, one number on top of the other, which determines how many beats per measure and what type of note gets a beat. So if you see 4/4, that's 1 2 3 4 2 2 3 4 3 2 3, like that. If it's 3/4, that's a waltz, so it's 1 2 3 2 2 3, and so on. Typically, you're not going to get a strange time signature. You're not going to get something in 7/8 or 5/8, although you might, depending on how many people they got auditioning and how few places they've got to fill. Once I get that time signature and I know what it is, I start tapping my foot to that time signature, and just to have it going through my head. The second thing that I look at is the key signature. The key signature determines which notes are flat or sharp, and it's a rule that stands throughout the piece. So if you have something in G, you'll have an F sharp, And that any Fs that you see in that sheet music or in that chart is going to be a sharp. It's going to be an F sharp. Which brings me to the next thing. Number 3 on the list of what to look for. After I've determined the time signature, the key signature, the next thing that I do is I scan through the piece, not real long, but just lightly scan through the piece, looking for accidentals, which are notes that have been altered outside of the key. Occasionally in G, instead of an F sharp, you'll see an F natural, and they'll have that marked. So you scan through and you look for those things. Another thing you look for when you're scanning through is if there are any time signature changes. Occasionally you'll have, in a 4/4 piece, you'll have one measure of 2/4 because of some cadence that's being set up to move on to the next part of the piece of music. So you scan through the piece looking for these abnormalities, accidentals, or time signature change. The last thing that I look for in a piece of music when I'm sight reading is the structure of the song. Are there any repeats? And if so, how many? Sometimes there's more than one repeat. Another thing that you look for is a thing called a DC alcoda or a DS alcoda. A DC alcoda means you go back to the top of the music and you play down till you see the coda symbol, which is a circle with a plus in the middle of it, and then you go to the coda, which is at the bottom of the beat, and that's where you end the piece. If you've got a DS alcoda, then you go back to where the funny little sign is, play through till you get to the coda, skip down to the end, and play the coda. Two things that I do not bother myself with when I'm sight reading, and this may irk some people, and some people may say, "Oh, that's crazy," and throw up their hands. I don't pay any attention to the tempo of the song. To me, the time signature, the key signature, getting the accidentals and taking the correct repeats are more important than the tempo of the song. Another thing I don't look at is the dynamic markings. When does it get loud? When does it get soft? Sometimes you'll see a crescendo or diminuendo. I don't even really look for those things because a lot of times you're going under a time restraint. You'll have 2 to 5 minutes to scan over this piece before you're expected to perform it. So I don't pay any attention to well, it looks like the flash on my camera went out. So it's going to be darker for the rest of this, and I'm going to figure out what's wrong with the flash on my phone, which if it's going out, then that's weird. Anyway, so the rest of this is dark. I was pretty much wrapped up anyway. So we'll go over the steps one more time. When you get this sheet of music, if it's something you've seen before, let the people know. Second, time signature. Third, key signature. Fourth thing is to scan the piece for any type of abnormalities, accidentals, time signature changes. And the last thing is to look at the song structure for repeats and all that. I don't look at any type of dynamic markings, and I don't look at tempo. So that's it. That's I guess my tutorial or a lesson on sight reading. So I hope you all enjoyed it. The patio is now closed.